Hello, everybody. We are back. And once again, we are blessed to have Dr. Hardt with us. Dr. Hardt, of course, you all know, but he is the founder, president, and chairman at Biocybernaut Institute. Dr. Hardt, thank you so much for being with us.
It's always a pleasure, Doug.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. One of the things that I've come across and we wanted to talk about today is really talking about the Alpha High. Now, the Alpha High, for those that haven't had the chance to go to Biocybernaut, is that feeling you get when you have high alpha. And I've experienced this twice since going through. It just seems to get greater, and greater as I go. But can you talk to us a little bit about that Alpha High?
Well, it's definitely an altered state. And some people want to come to Biocybernaut for the practical, real-world benefits. Boosting IQ, becoming more creative, raising their emotional intelligence, and the benefits of reduced anxiety, depression, anger, hostility, all of those things. But there is an aspect of the motivation in some of the people where they want to get high and feel good. Now, one of my favorite cartoons, it's not Peanuts, is Baba Rebop, the Sage of the West. Now, it's not nearly as popular as Peanuts, but it's like Peanuts. It's a 4-picture cartoon. And the first frame, there's a guy in a sport coat and a tie climbing a steep mountain. You can tell it's steep because his tie is hanging away from his chest. Then in the second frame, he arrives at a ledge up the mountain. And there's Baba, the guru, sitting on a blanket. And in the background, there's a cave with some candles flickering. And the guy says to Baba, "Oh, Baba, I'm so concerned about the problem of drugs in today's society." And the third picture, Baba is sitting there with an empty dotted balloon. He's reflecting, maybe pulling information out of the Akashic records. And in the fourth picture, Baba speaks, and he says, poignantly, "The only way to solve the problem of drugs in today's society is to improve reality." And so when you think about it, people do drugs for one or two reasons. One, to get high, feel good. There's an ancient human tradition of that. I mean, the fermentation of alcohol, which goes back thousands of years, was so people could get high and feel good. And the other reason that people use drugs is to blot out negative experiences, to numb themselves out so they don't have to think about the trauma or the sadness or the grief or the anxiety or whatever it is they want to block out. And so at Biocybernaut, we know that brain waves rule. And so any experience that you have as a living human being, you have those experiences only when you have the appropriate underlying pattern of brainwaves. Brainwaves rule. And so any drug that you take has an effect only because it changes your brainwaves. Now, some of the drugs that people take, like alcohol, they numb themselves out. Now, there is, and it's enshrined in the working world, is happy hour. And people get off their stressful jobs and they gather in some place where they can purchase and consume alcohol and maybe get a little rowdy. And they call it happy hour. Well, actually, it's happy 3/4 hour, because when stressed people start consuming alcohol, there is a body relaxation. Muscles actually relax. And so this lasts for about 45 minutes. And that's definitely a feel-good experience. But then the central nervous suppressing effects of alcohol begin to kick in, and their alpha starts to take a downhill slide, which, depending on how long they drink, continues all the way to the hangover the next day. And so there are another drug that people take recreationally is marijuana. Now, there's an article long ago published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. You could just see these, first-year med students sitting around. They had access to a brainwave analyzing computer, And they go, well, let's get high and see what happens to our brainwaves. And so what they reported was that marijuana produces an increase in alpha activity, and it also produces a slight slowing of the frequency. These are two effects of Zen meditation. And so now Eric Good, probably somewhere in the 80s, wrote a paper entitled On Becoming a Marijuana User, because the strange sensations are such that people need help in interpreting these as positive. If somebody has the experience alone or without context, they may actually get paranoid at the changes that are occurring. And so becoming a marijuana user requires, in most cases, some socialization where the altered perceptions, the altered body feelings are interpreted as pleasurable. And so then people actually seek that out. But the thing is that these effects can be had, the increased alpha and the slowing of the alpha, with brainwave feedback training. You don't need to use the drug. Remember, the drugs are there simply to change the brainwaves to produce an effect that people want, which is either get high, feel good, or block out, numb themselves, and not to think about some negative experiences or traumas. And so all of these are available with the brainwave training. And so as alpha goes up, there is a subjective experience, certainly associated with letting go of the anxiety and opening. And of course, at Biocybernaut, we teach forgiveness. But even before that was a part of the protocol, people would get high and feel good. And this, because they do it themselves, they learn how to increase their alpha themselves, they have access to this state when they leave the training center. Unlike with the drug, if you don't have the drug, you can't change your brainwaves. But when you learn internally how to change your brainwaves, it becomes like, scratching your right cheek. You do that, you know how to do it, and you can do it anytime. And so one of the delights that I experienced back when I was in the University of California at San Francisco, we were training college students, and we'd be sitting at the lab, and the phone would ring, and it would be a college student walking down Market Street. Back in those days, they had these things called phone booths, and the college student would have had an alpha burst, and so call it a joy burst, and he would rush to the telephone and call the lab and let us know. So that was a wonderful form of feedback. Now, in the history of brainwave feedback, there was initially, by some people, resistance to the idea of an alpha high. Many people were, on the anti-drug bandwagon, and the idea that there should be some non-drug way of getting high was anathema to certain kinds of social conservatives. And it's an interesting historical footnote that brainwave feedback was discovered and reported in California in 1962, April 1962, Kamiya at the Western Psychological Association meeting. In 1962 is also the year in which LSD became illegal in California. So one technology was taken away and another one came forward. But still, there were certain social conservatives who were very opposed to the idea that there was an alpha high. And so it kind of had to be, lurking in the shadows a little bit. It was okay to do alpha to reduce anxiety or, to help get people off drugs, but you shouldn't do alpha in order to get high and feel good. But in fact, that's what happens when you make alpha. You get high and you feel good, and it's a natural high. It's a sustainable high. It's something you can turn on anytime that you're rested and you haven't had those naughty caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, onion, garlic substance. And so the idea of there being an alpha high is well established, although it's kind of been lurking in the shadows for a long time. And I feel that it's time to bring it out and bring it front and center. Yes, there is an alpha high, and the bigger your alpha gets and the more coherent it gets, the stronger and more persistent this high becomes. Now, it's associated with a number of sensory enhancements. And let's go back to the drug model. Now, there were reports from the 60s and 70s of kids getting stoned and going to the park and lying in the grass and claiming to hear the earthworms moving under the ground or the grass growing. Well, I grew up on a farm in Minnesota, and I can tell you, if you go out into the cornfields on a July night, you can actually hear the corn grow. As the water comes up, the stalks expand, they actually snap and pop and as they're in the process of growing. So yes, you can hear the corn grow, but grass growing, that's a little more challenging. But kids on LSD said that they could hear the grass grow. So let's look at an LSD experiment that was done with cats. Now, when people go for a hearing test, they can receive instructions like, well, if you hear a tone in your left ear, push, this button with your left finger. And if you hear it in the right ear, push it with the right finger. And so you can then see how faint a sound and in what frequency people can hear. Well, you can't do that with kitties. So what they did was they inserted a tiny needle electrode into the cochlear nucleus. The cochlear nucleus is a way station in the brain between the mechanism of the ear and the higher hearing centers of the brain. And so you have the mechanism in the ear, starting with the eardrum, that receives pressure waves, sound waves, and translate them into neural activity. Well, if the ear has successfully resolved acoustic energy and converted it into neural energy, there will be activity in the cochlear nucleus. So it doesn't mean the kitty heard, because the kitty might be asleep, or it might be ready to pounce on a mouse and it's not attending to its hearing. It's just focusing on the mouse. And so, but the precondition for hearing is that there be activity in the cochlear nucleus. This means that the mechanism of the ear has resolved acoustic energy and converted it into neural energy. So they took a whole bunch of kitties and they measured their auditory threshold, how faint a sound they could hear. And so then they gave them a very tiny dose of LSD, 1 microgram per kilogram of body weight. This would be like for a 70 kilogram guy, it would be, 70 micrograms. So kids were taking thousands of micrograms. So this is a, very tiny dose. Well, what this produced was a fall in the auditory threshold of a full order of magnitude. People could hear fainter sounds. And I'm also happy to report that people's hearing improves in the course of the alpha training. And so it's clear that the mechanism of the kitty's ear is the same mechanism with or without LSD. And so the mechanism in the ear for a human is the same with or without enhanced alpha. But with the enhanced alpha, the mechanism in the ear resolves sounds more fully. And so one of our trainees, a woman, had a long, excited story that she told about what she called alpha eyes. After her alpha training, she saw the world differently. Now, one part is just, greater visual acuity. Colors seem brighter and more beautiful, but also there are structural relationships between things in the visual field. And these resulted in her recognition of higher level patterns. One of the things that she did was she completely redecorated her home. In her home, she had reds and blacks and oranges, and she replaced all of them, took them all out. And so she had then blues and greens and yellows, which are more conscious colors. At Biocybernaut, we cut the color spectrum between orange and yellow, and we approve all the colors from yellow to green to teal to blue to violet, purple, all of those. And we typically exclude the colors that are redward of orange, pink, red, and so on, which activate the lower chakras. And so when you go to a Biocybernaut training center, you will not see red or orange anywhere. And this is by conscious design. Blue is the color that is most associated with alpha. So blue will be the predominant color. Now, the enhancement of visual perception is very interesting in terms of seeing beauty, but also in seeing the patterns. But that's not the only sense that is enhanced. Taste and touch and smell are also enhanced. In my California centers, my home in San Francisco was near the San Francisco Farmers Market, and I would go there 6 a.m. every Saturday morning to buy fresh produce from the farmers. And one of my favorites was during peach season. The peaches would have been picked the evening before and hand-packed, and they would be like, as big as grapefruit and way more delicious. Well, one time I had a San Francisco 49er in training during peach season. And about 4 or 5 days into his 7-day alpha training, he discovered the bowl of peaches on the table. And I have to say that his devouring those peaches was almost pornographic, because he was having such delight with the juice running down his cheek, and oh my God, oh, this is so good. It was like into incredible sensual enhancement of the gustatory sense. And so alpha training, it's not just alpha eyes, but the alpha high includes enhancement of all the other senses. And this can also include touch. So doing alpha and then getting massage, or just tickling your own feet, is a not to be forgotten pleasure. And so there is an alpha high, and it hasn't been talked about nearly enough. And so we're going to begin an active series of talking about different examples of sensory enhancement that occurs for people who do the Biocybernaut Alpha training.
That's really exciting. I didn't know a lot of that, especially when it comes to the hearing. So I look forward to the series that you'll be putting on, and I can certainly attest to myself, but also many, many other people I talk to, having a continuous alpha high after my training and beyond. So as always, Dr. Hardt, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I know how busy you are, and I know, in fact, you're going into a training to help some other individuals out. So thank you for all the work you do.
You're welcome, Doug. Lovely to hang out with you.
Hi, I'm Tony Robbins. Listen, if you are looking to improve your brain, your psyche, your ability, your emotions, your ability to really maximize your performance, and you want to really dig into your brain, my dear friend, Dr. Jim Hardt, and his Biocybernaut program is extraordinary. I've been through it myself. My wife Sage has, members of my family have, and we found it to be truly extraordinary. But it is not for the faint at heart. Unless you're dead serious about really taking things to the next level, don't bother. We went through the Alpha program designed to maximize your ability to create alpha waves. And it was challenging, and it was incredibly rewarding. And I'd recommend it to anybody serious about improving the quality of their lives, or including the quality of their family lives as well. So check out Cybernaut, check out Dr. Jim Hardt. And if you do, I think you'll be really, really pleased.
And the entire time you are learning to think, and how you think these electrodes create sounds. And you learn how to put yourself in the zone of alpha. But it's a bitch. It's horrible. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody that wants easy experiences, but I'd recommend it to anybody that wants to grow immensely. And by the first day, I'm like, who do I got to shoot to get out of this thing? Oh, it's me. I'm the one that did this shit. Right? But by the end of the week, all three of us were able to go in this state of alpha. And if you're familiar with alpha, the best way I can describe alpha is there's no problem that can't be solved in alpha. Because every problem that we have was created by us.
Thank you for being here and absorbing this information about the science of brainwaves and about the stories of people whose lives have been beneficially altered, improved by doing brainwave training at Biocybernaut. And now I'm reaching out to you to invite you to come and be a part of the Biocybernaut adventure. Biocybernauts are to inner space what astronauts are to outer space. So come and adventure with us. And if you'd like to leave a comment on the videos, you can do that, or there's a link you can click if you'd like to learn more. We welcome you to Biocybernaut.